Okay, I think everybody is in. Good evening. Tonight we are going to have a talk on garum, and I will tell you the story of how we decided to have such a talk. First, I have to say that Turquoise is a new platform, a non-profit cultural platform based in London, which aims to spread the culinary culture and music culture of Anatolia, starting from all the way from Iran to Black Sea and all the in the Mediterranean. So I know the founder of Batu Akyol from a documentary shooting years back, and he interviewed me, and then we had this mutual interest on garum, because during this documentary, he found that some fishermen, and especially one fisherman, Jaco Karayanli, an Anatolian Greek room, is still making garos in the Princess Islands just off Istanbul. And I was the gastronomy section curator of the Princess Island Museum. And then I had similar information about some fishermen still making garos in the Burgazada, which is one of the Princess Islands. So we had this mutual interest, we talked about it, and we forgot all about each other. Then a couple of months ago, Batu called me and said that now they are starting this Turquoise platform in London, and now he is based in London. And then chatting when, we discussed the opportunity of making some culinary talk or me writing for them. And then all of a sudden he asked me whether I heard about a new book on garum. And I said, of course, it's Sally Grainger's book, and she's a friend of mine. And then I told all the story about Sally's talk years back. I think it was 2010 at the Oxford Food Symposium, when the theme was fermented, cured, and smoked. And that was the stinkiest symposium ever. And I remember also Sally exactly how she experimented on garum in her backyard in England, and all her studies on recreating garum. So it's experimental archaeology. And I was very excited. And that's the same year I met with Harold McGee. And that's another story I will tell you later. And then, of course, I said we can do a maybe video chat with Sally. And so, and the things started to get wild after that, because I knew that Pere Planagumà from Spain, Two-Michelin starred chef, has newly launched a new garum called Escata. So it's the modern garum. And so I asked him whether he could join in. He said he was delighted. And then that was my dream to come true, history and the chef. So the cook and the historian was there, the archaeologist was there, but we still had a missing ingredient, and that was the science. So I had the courage to call Harold McGee, again with some courage from Pere Planagumà, because they know each other. And I saw actually a handwritten note of Harold McGee to Pere, saying that to the master of modern garum. So, but of course, Harold McGee is very busy, because his new book, Nosedive, the Guide of World Smells, is just out, and everybody is after him. So, but he agreed to join us. And then, of course, Sally brought in Dimitra Mylona from Crete, which is very we were very happy to meet her, because she had a research on the from the Garum period to up till now, to contemporary times, all the cured fishes, fermented fishes, especially in the Aegean, and all going to the Bosphorus and Scutari, which is Üsküdar. So her contribution was so precious. And then we had Elvan Uysal Bottoni to bring in the Italian angle. Elvan Bottoni is a Turkish writer, and she's based, and she's a taster. She's an olive oil taster, honey taster, and she's based in Rome. And the moment she heard that she is in this meeting, the next day she was going to the Amalfi Coast, to Cetara, to find everything about Kolotura di Alici. So here we have many angles. So our plan is Sally will make a presentation on her book. So it will be like the concise presentation of what she has written in her book, the story of Garum. And then Dimitra will take over from where she leaves, bringing Garum to contemporary times. And then Harold will be explaining us the science of garum, or fermented fish, or fish sauces, what happens really, and the taste profile and the smell and everything want to know about the science. And then Pere will tell us how he was interested in garum, and tell his own story, and this very Michelin star chef angle to it, and how he makes his garum, his products, and how he uses it in his cuisine, and about the zero waste angle, and how also the Spanish angle, because recently, last year in 2020, there was a museum totally dedicated to garum in Cadiz. So, and then, of course, Elvan will be telling about the Italian angle. So we are going to hop around the Mediterranean, and we have a question and answer angle period after that. Our time is 1.5 hours, but we can take our time if the questions are really bubbling. And then we'll have also a guest speaker, Fatih Tutak, a celebrated chef who was famed in Bangkok and then moved to Istanbul, and he experiments and does a lot of things with garum. So please also feel free to write your questions to the question and answer box, and I leave the ground to Sally. There must be a technical stitch. I'm trying to reach the guys in turquoise, because it's our very, very first talk, so we may have technical problems like that. And I didn't introduce myself. My name is Aylin Öney Tan. I'm a food writer based in Istanbul and Ankara, and sometimes in Izmir. And I used to be a long-time symposiast for the Oxford Symposium on Food and Cookery, and that's how I know Sally Grainger and Harold McGee. And also, my real profession is architecture and conservation historic economics. So that's why I'm very passionate about history and science and gastronomy combined. So, okay, Sally is here, so I leave the ground to her.
Hello there. Thank you very much, Aylin. What a wonderful introduction. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm assuming you can see my screen. So, I am at the moment not able to. Here we are. Here we are. At the moment, I am not able to. If somebody could hear me, it would be useful if they could change my PowerPoint for me, because at the moment I don't seem to be able to change my slides. Batu, can you hear me? Hello, everybody. I cannot see my PowerPoint. Is there? Can anybody hear me? Yes, I cannot seem to change my PowerPoint. And my PowerPoint is distorted. There. Can somebody change my slides for me? Can somebody change my slides for me? Okay, super. Okay. This is big. Thank you. All right, please. If you could change my slide for me. Could you change my slide for me to the next slide? I'd be grateful. Okay, we're going to try. I'm going to talk to you with my first slide and start to change my slides. I've been looking at fish sauce for over 10 years. I started working as a chef. I then worked with Experimentation, and I was interested in Roman food. And Roman food is essentially fish sauce. That is what makes it interesting and exciting. And eventually I worked towards MA in archaeology, and my dissertation had to be something to do with fish. The essential thing about ancient food that excited me the most. So over the last 10 years, I've been working entirely on fish sauce, and culminated in my new book, which is called The Story of Garum. The multidisciplinary approach. So I've worked with the fish bones, I've worked with products, and I've worked with the texts, the didactic texts, and also the elite text, satire. And I've looked at experimental archaeology, and I've looked at modern fish sauce. I've been an entire gamut of information about the nature of garum. It's a holistic approach. It's a very complex story, and there's a great deal of detail that I'll go into here if I can't change my slides, which is a big problem. So, garum is basically the juices of fish, or meat, according to Dioscorides. According to Horace, it's of fish, and so this is probably mackerel. But these products are evolving constantly, and is that we cannot pin it down. It it seems impossible to pin it down because it's evolving all the time. Now, what I did with my book was actually do a chronological account of fish source, both archaeologically and from a literary perspective, side by side, to see exactly what was going on when. And I decided, I discovered that I could divide the history of fish source into 3 stages. There's an early stage in the early Greek period. There's a central period from about 150 BC through to about 250 AD, and there's a period in the late Roman period. If you go right back to the beginning of the slides, that would be great. So we're on number 5 at the moment. If you go back to the beginning, that would be super. Thank you. So the central period is, if you go to the next one, that'd be brilliant. The central period is the key because it's the central period where all the evidence survives. We have the literary perspective because the elite consumer is obsessed with garum and talks about it a lot. We have all the evidence of its production through the archaeology and the amphora, and we also have the epigraphy. Now, the epigraphy is hugely important because it's the amphora labels on that these fish source transported in, and they are very detailed and they give us lots of information, but we are confused often by the meaning of them. Very complex. In the later period, i.e. the Byzantine, the products evolve again. So they're what they are in that central period, and they are in the early period, and they evolve again and they change in the third period. What happens, many people who try and understand fish sources, there's an awful lot of anomalies. They use evidence from the later period to try and define what's going on in the central period, and that doesn't work. We will concentrate on the central period. There's also considerable ancient commentators and communities define these products and how modern chefs define them. This is one of the key things about tonight's event. As they evolve into the modern world, they have changed so much. But we will also outline the production methods with my own experiments and discuss ideas of quality in terms of nutrition, salt levels and taste, and a little bit of discussion about. I could have the next slide, please. Could I have the next slide, please? Or shall I change it now? I can change it now. Okay, we're rolling at I'm sorry about that glitch. So there are 2 recipes, 2 sources for recipes in the ancient. One thing we should also first say is that garum is not Roman. We always think of it as Roman fish together. Roman, actually, it's the Greek fish source. It was invented by the Greeks. The culinary practices that determined how it was used were invented by the Greeks, and it was Greek texts that preserved their use. Those Greek texts in the world were promulgated, and the Romans fish source in a big way, and they ran with it and they did new ones, but actually Garos, as it was, is Greek. So there is 2 texts. One is Ponica. It's a Greek agricultural manual from the 10th century, but it's actually containing information from all over the Roman period. So it's ideal if we think of this source as Greek. And the other one was a text by a guy called Gargilius Martius, but gloss, which means the material added into a text from the 3rd century. And it's a difficult recipe. There's lots of anacronyms in it, so I don't value it as a recipe at all. I follow these very simple, very straightforward, very logical, very understandable recipes, while Gargilius' recipe causes a lot of problems for us. Okay, so I'll change my slide. Can you change the slide for Anne? I'd be grateful. Here we are. There are 2 ways to make it. Open to the sun's heat is what the rest. Watertight tanks, these are the here in Cadiz, this is the most famous site, or an enclosed container. Thank you. And the enclosed container is almost certainly airtight. And there's possibility of a much smaller way of making it open to the sun in dolia. These are the dolia from the fish sauce shop in Pompeii. And you can see there are roof tiles on the top of these dolia. And this is not an airtight seal. And what we have is two distinct types of making fish sauce. One has to be airtight, one. And of course, what that means is that there is a loss of volume due to evaporation. And this is the most important factor about making fish sauce. If you leave it open to the sun, the water that exudes from the fish evaporates, and you have to keep replacing it in order to generate sauce. Otherwise, you end up with a paste and a thick mush at the bottom of the tank and no sauce at all. And what we're looking for is a clear, sparkling liquid. Please. Next, please. So, in the Geoponica, the open to the sun recipe, fish viscera thing on the list, but it doesn't mean it's the most important item. I think you put the viscera at the bottom, then you add lots of small fish, what we call clupids and sparrows, anything small enough. Sardine, anchovy, pickerel, with salt. It's stirred. It's ready. It doesn't tell us a lot. Another recipe in the same text uses larger fish, such as mackerel, and it implies that they're cut open. Certainly another recipe that we had. And the salt levels is 7:1, which is roughly equivalent to about 15%. Both suggest that they should be stirred a lot. After 2 or 3 months, wine is added, and it's we've already talked about. There is a need for extra liquid at every stage of this production. Adding wine at 2:1 with the fish seemed to me at the time to be really wrong as a recipe, but actually it works very well. Extra viscera is there, I believe, to aid the digestion process, and it's not a fundamental part of the recipe. Extra liquid is fundamental to the recipe, and a quick cooked recipe where you basically take brine and you put fish in it and you boil it up together, strain it, and you've got something that has very little nutrition and certainly no umami, which is what we're after. Very much what we're after. So, slide please. So the enclosed method, this is a little which I shall read out to you. There's a description of the herbs that are being used initially. Then the second layer, fish, whole if they are small, cut into pieces if they are larger. Over this is added a third layer of salt. Now this is 2 fingers deep. This is a lot of salt. And the vessel is to be filled right to the top with successive triple layers of herbs and fish salt. And it should then be closed up with a lid fitted, sealed, I'd take that to mean, and put aside for 7 days. And then it's left for another month, and then it's supposed to. Now, what happens with this particular technique is that the herbs and the excessive salt lead to a very dry environment, and the excessive salt actually impedes the enzyme hydrolyzation down of the fish, the liquefaction of the fish. It's broken down. Can I see my slides? I'd be grateful if I could see my slides. I can see myself. Thank you. Lovely. So high salt levels reduce enzyme activity. It's very difficult. It's so tightly packed, and there's an awful lot of salt that stays in crystal form. But there's obviously no loss of volume, and it's possible that a small with an open to the sun technique as opposed to this way of doing it. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Right, so out of the blue, this is the kind of fish sauce that was being made right through the Hellenistic period and the 1st century BC. Suddenly somebody called Apicius invented a new way of. It's called initially garum, and then hymation, and then melan. Now, tokiorum is difficult to interpret, but hymation is bloody, and melan is black. Bloody black sauce. Apicius is known for his recipe book. It's a name. His name is attached to it, but it was actually written by slave cooks. And as a gourmet, he's said to have decided to look at the blood and viscera inside a mullet initially, and they put them together with salt, they fermented them, and they made a sauce they liked. And it became popular. It spread probably around the Bay of Naples, Baiae, and that holiday, the Bay of Naples, where all the rich Romans went and to consume their fish from their fish ponds. There's a possibility that's where it came from. Eventually, they had to start making it out of larger fish, and mackerel became the dominant species for this bloody. And ultimately, it was tuna, because you can get an awful lot more blood and viscera from tuna. Now, this product is disparaged by a lot of Romans. They distrust it, and to be perfectly honest, you can't blame them. It's made from fish rubbish, after all. What do you think of that costly so-called Garum Sociorum, the costly extract? Sanies means exudate from wounds. Sanies of poisonous fish burns up the stomach to putrefaction, and it is described as being made from the blood of a still breathing mackerel, which basically means you have to literally take the fish out of the sea and bleed them immediately to extract enough blood to make this kind of sauce. So techniques for cutting the fish to bleed them. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So here's the recipe in the Geoponica for the kind of garum that was made with tuna. A rather high quality garos called Hymation is made thus: take tunny entrails and gills, fluid and blood, sprinkle with sufficient, I don't know what how much salt, leave in a vessel for 2 months at the most, which rather implies it's not fermented for a long time. I used to think surely to improve its quality it would have been fermented for longer. Then pierce the jar, and the garos, so-called Hymation, flows out. Now, what happens? This little bottle on the side is my attempt at making garum Hymation. I went fishing in the Solent, which is a body of water between and the British coast, and I got 100 mackerel, and I bled some of them. It was not easy, difficult process, and I made garum. Now, what happens is the viscera. I digest the enzymes in the viscera, and you end up with this thick paste. You get some oil on the top, and you get the black liquid forming on the bottom. And in a ceramic vessel, basically, clearly, what would happen is that and all this fine black liquid would come out, and you would throw away the residue. This is not something fit for consumption. The mush, the paste left over from the making of garum. Next slide, please. We have a problem then, because it arrives in Rome, it's transliterated and translated into garum. So garum and garos are the same thing. But then you have a problem, because you have gourmets who want to call their black and bloody sauce garum, and you can't have two distinct sauces, because a black and bloody garum and a whole fish dissolved together are very, very different in terms of taste and appearance and the uses, as we'll see with the recipes. So you have two distinct sauces and one name, and the manufacturer, trader, merchant, and cook are confused and angry. And you actually see some of that frustration later in some of the texts. So I think the manufacturer, there's no evidence of this at all. It has to be conjecture. A new term had to be coined for the old sauce, and that was liquamen. And liquamen is from the Latin word liquare, to liquefy. Over time, garum became a general term for the sauce, as opposed to it being garum sociorum or garum Hymation. People just called it garum, and so you have this nice, neat distinction. And it's obvious from the amphora, and particularly amphora that are tray, where the evidence is really quite strong for this distinction between a liquamen made from mackerel, which is liquefied mackerel, and a garum made from mackerel, which is the blood and viscera from that mackerel. Very different technique of making it, and the labels are a great fun to study. We won't go into more detail, So clarity of garum is difficult to understand because obviously liquamen is a simple liquefied fish. It's useful. It's a cooking liquor, but the black and bloody garum is difficult to understand. So, next slide, please. Alongside garum, and then liquamen, you have something called halmes, Latin muria, which is the brine derived from salted fish. This is a cleaned, sanitized sauce. So there's no digestive enzymes, the enzymes that dissolve the fish. And it was actually seen as more desirable in early Greek texts, whereas less common or seen as actually a poverty food. This product is dominated by the brine associated with tuna and mackerel, but clearly other fish. From the labels, we get only tuna and mackerel. Aged up to 4 years. I personally wouldn't eat a piece of mackerel that had been sitting in brine for 4 years. I suspect it's just brine that aged. But this term is also greatly disputed. Many of my colleagues actually believe muria has lots of other meanings, and there's a lot of ambiguity about how the Romans talk about these terms. And if you're really interested in that question, read the book, because the debate is all there. It is a glorious picture of some brine that I actually, from a piece of tuna that I was given a kitchen in Athens. I was having an ancient Greek banquet, and the tuna had been caught fresh in the Aegean, and it hadn't been bled fully because the brine that I generated was bright pink. It looked like rosé wine. It was fascinating. Every piece of tuna that I've ever tried to salt to generate brine since has been just a grey. So I think it just inadequately bled tuna, and I think in today's market tuna is very carefully bled because the blood taints them. So that was a surprise, because if you can imagine, we're looking at whether or not a sauce is black and bloody. It would have sort of changed my attitude to what a bloody sauce was. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just a quick roundup on liquamen and garum for clarity. Gyros, early garum, and then liquamen is the equivalent to modern fish sauce from Southeast Asia. It's an amber liquid when filtered. It's a mixture of small and medium-sized fish that are to dissolve in the brine, extra viscera to aid the liquefaction process. The salt is 15%. There is additional fluid. It could be brine. It was probably wine when it was expensive. 2 to 3 months fermentation, but may continue to ferment for. And the residues, as we'll see, were almost certainly rebrined. It's a bulk cooking liquor. It's used in quite large quantities, and the salt at 15% makes it possible to do that. So, for instance, it's full stock, but you can use it with equal quantity of wine, fish sauce, oil, and make a dressing which is quite palatable if you use the salt. The black garum is it's black and bloody. It's a table condiment. It tastes very strangely of iron. It's an acquired taste. It actually works very, very well with oil, but that's the only place where I found it works. It's only fermented for a month, for 2 months apparently, which is odd. I think it probably would have continued to ferment in the amphora. You cannot rebrine. The paste left over from the liquefaction of the viscera, it doesn't have any value, while the fish paste from liquamen does, very definitely, as we will see. And it's a table sauce. It's not used at all in the cooking process. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Lovely. So very briefly, in the late period, things get very complicated. Liquamen, or garum, becomes less popular. Anthemus says don't consume it at all. Early Christians in the East are prohibited from consuming blood of any animal, including fish, and so that caused the decline of Garum sociorum hymation. We only find it used in medicinal sources. Certain Orthodox Christian groups even reject, even are from eating fresh fish because it's contaminated, not actually remove it, and so the fish are salted and stored in brine, and that brine, which is a muria, then is utilized as a seasoning sauce, and it was called a gyros in Cyprus. Because salting over for 24 hours to draw out the blood from the fish is almost certainly the origin of Kolotura, as we will see. But in these circumstances, gyros, garum, liquamen, and muria could all mean the same thing, which kind of is just too confusing for words. And also people start to revert to using garum again to describe the original fish source, because with the blood vessel source having died out and ceased to be a commercial commodity, there was no good reason to keep using liquamen. Next slide, please. Next slide. So now we're going to look at pictures of fish gloop, which is fun. What happens when you put fish and salt together? It turns into this thick, creamy, red emulsion. Particles of muscle tissue disintegrate and float off into the brine that is generated. And over time, it becomes saturated in these particles. And on the right-hand side is a mackerel liqueur I made, and this is after 3 months. It has become saturated at 2 levels. So the liquid in this sauce is saturated with dissolved protein and salt. The liquid is also saturated in the fish particles, and these pieces of fish simply stopped dissolving. They were static for about a week, and I had to add more fluid, or in fact I didn't add more fluid away brine to get a second sauce. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here we are. So a little out of, oh yeah, that's better. So the whitebait sauce, you can see what's happening. The whitebait have disintegrated, fish paste floating at 2 levels, and the liquor forming in the middle. Basically, the fish paste on the top has shed most of its protein relative to the density of the liquor, and therefore the fish paste at the bottom has still got a lot of protein within it, and so it's heavier and sinks. What happens is, it's hard to see, I know that it's coming in and out of focus, but the fish simply shed all their flesh. The bones become cleaned and white. And what happens with larger fish like mackerel is that after 3 months, you get your alec, as it's called. Alec is the residue, according to the Geoponica, and there is equal quantities of flavor that turn into a second sauce, not a second quality sauce, just a second stage sauce. So all that fish can go on dissolving with fresh brine added. Next slide. Next slide, please. Brilliant. Okay. Next slide. Okay. The particles, as I said, float on the surface and are suspended throughout, and this determines the nutrition of the sauce. Obviously, gentle heat is going to help. It does, but not boiling, I don't think. And also agitation, so transferring it from one tank to the other, or from a tank to an amphora, would help taste. And what I discovered was that long-term storage of this unfiltered sauce increased the protein levels of the sauce. You get a better quality sauce. Now, also, these particles of muscle tissue floating can be completely. I've lost my slides altogether now. I'm sorry, peeps. Here we are. It's gone again. It's come back. So these particles of fish paste can be strained out completely, and it becomes a smooth fish paste that you can consume as a relish. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And a lot of problems about how this alec fish paste with colleagues think that the alec was actually consumed with its bones intact. And I think because you can take it off from the bones, and then, next slide please, you can actually create a fish paste which is smooth. Next slide please. And so this is what I did. This is my sardine sauce, and I strained it through metal sieves, and I got my crystal clear amber liquid, and I got my glorious fish paste. And what I did was I took the fish paste and reconstituted it with brine. I left it for 2 months, and then both sort of one I harvested from the paste and the one that I got from my second washing of the paste were sent off to be tested for nutrition at the same time. And the one derived from the paste was of greater quality and tasted better than the one that I took, because I filtered it as soon as I took it off the tank, when it would have been much better to leave it to mature as an emulsion. And this is a image of what I think the kind of used to strain their alec. This is a mosaic from Marbella. Oh, and this is obviously a cloth hanging over a bowl. So next slide please. I'm going to speed through the last of them because I know there's other people want to speak. Next slide please. Here so a quick look at sources. The salt could be anything from 25 to 40%. They ferment for 18 months minimum. It's a long process, but it results in a complete liquid fish. I have a description of somebody putting a glass into the top of one of these tanks and pulling it up, and it was like whiskey. So the fish paste that I generated completely dissolved in the process of 18 months of fermentation. The air temperature in Southeast Asia is something in the region of 30 degrees plus. But the liquid temperature doesn't go above 25. And I believe this is likely to be the case in southern Spain as well. They make these fish sauces. Nevertheless, the liquid that is harvested after 18 months is a saturated sauce, and there is something in the region of 40% of the potential nutrition still in the residue at the bottom of the tank to get second sauces. And what they do in Southeast Asia is to rebrine the residue 2 or 3 times, and then they blend it all to get one standard. Yes, next slide please. So fish sauce in use. This is the one slide, just done. The Qualman was blended with oil, wine and vinegar to make dressings, and they were called Garum, poured onto food and used as a dip. And it's also added to the liquors, to the cooking liquors used for dishes like patina, which is starter, and unital, which is a kind of meat and fish in a sauce. It's, as I said, used in quantity, and you simply cannot do that with fish sauces. While black garum is also blended with oil, wine and vinegar to make dressings for dipping and pouring. It's poured neat onto oysters. Now, my black garum on an oyster, beautiful, absolutely glorious. It's also poured onto cooked dishes like patina. We get that specifically described. So very distinct in their use. Next slide, please. I think we're on the last one. So colour is key. A fine fresh fish sauce is going to be amber in colour. An aged sauce is going to be red oat is my favourite fish sauce because it is very, very high in nutrition and very low in salt. Ishiri is a sauce that resembles the black and bloody fish sauce, but is made from squid. And we will hear about Kolotura and we will hear about Ascata. The flor de garum is made in Cadiz, and it's a good taste, I like it, but it's made using the Gargilis recipe, so there's a lot of herbs in it. So it's and it's also uses that level of salt that I'm doubtful of. So it's very powerful. You cannot make Roman recipes out of that, and in fact, you can't make Roman recipes at all. Red Boat want to make Roman recipes. So I think I'm done. My last slide is just saying thank you, and I look forward to questions at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Unmute. Yes. Well, now Dimitra Mylona is from the island of Crete. And I forgot to tell this that in the last 3 years, she has been involved in an EU-funded project on the cultural heritage of fishing communities, and especially in the North Aegean. And many of the fishermen she talked with came from Asia Minor, from Thrace, from Black Sea. So they were, we have, how do you say, common shared heritage. So she will tell us all the practices of fish sources of the fishing communities and also other preserved fishes, mostly in the Aegean, but in the Mediterranean, and also, up to Istanbul. So we are so happy to have Dimitra, because she's bringing the fish culture up to date in a way. She's doing fish anthropology or ethnography, I can say. So welcome, Dimitra.
This is a very happy occasion that has brought us together tonight. A new book is always a cause for joy, and the discussion this discussion about Garum with all those exciting people in the panel adds some extra joy to the event. Those of you who have anyone who reads Sally's book can consider themselves well informed on the topic of Garum. So I was wondering what I could bring to this discussion that hasn't been covered in the book already. So that's why I decided to pick up the thread where Sally left it at the end of late antiquity and explore a bit what happened to Garum since then. It is said that the art of Garum making was lost. So today we had to reinvent it and to borrow from ancient sources, from experimentation, from ethnographic knowledge from the Far East. We will hear more about all these things tonight. But for those of us who live around the Aegean coasts, and probably in the Black Sea as well, Garos, or some form of this word, is something that we hear a lot. Not a lot. It's something that we hear and something that seemed to exist. So the question for me was, did Garos survive in this part of the Mediterranean? I will try to take you along to this quest. And I would like to start with some orientation. Let me see. Now, I suppose you can see the slides, right? So, Garum was a big thing in economy and gastronomy for a little over a millennium. This is the period covered by Sally's book. Garum existed before that, but we know very little about it. The question now is what happened to Garum after the 6th or the 7th centuries of the Common Era, and if it's still around now. Researchers agree that by the 8th century of the Common Era, Garum production has ceased in the West, and the famous or infamous fish sauce was forgotten. But this is not the case in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. Here, we call the Middle Ages Byzantine period, and things regarding Garum took a different turn. Our knowledge on how gyros was produced is based to a large degree on this text, the Geoponica. Sally has discussed this source in detail. It is, as she said earlier, a collection of agricultural knowledge compiled during the 10th century for the Byzantine Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitus. This work was based on a number of older studies on the topic, and some of them date as early as the 3rd century before the Common Era. And that's why the description of how to make garum that we read in this book is relevant to the study of garum production in antiquity. But at the same time, Geoponica is very relevant to what was happening in Byzantium in the 10th century. At that time, gyros were still produced in this part of the Mediterranean, and it was actually much appreciated. We have the well-known testimony for this fact by an Italian diplomat and historian who was called Liutprand. He was the bishop of Cremona, a place in northern Italy. He visited Constantinople. So Liutprand visited Constantinople at the time, and he wrote about his garum experience. Upon his arrival, he dined at the table of the emperor, the same emperor I mentioned before, and he was shocked by the fact that the tables had no tablecloths on, and by the food itself. And he says that the dinner was quite nasty and unspeakable, drunkenly awash with oil and drenched with another very unpleasant liquid made from fish. And apparently he is referring to garum. It seems that he had never tasted it before in his home back in Italy, northern Italy. And he hadn't even heard about it. He didn't know about it. Although I should tell you that at the same time, 10th century, garum was produced in a monastery in southern Italy on the Amalfi coast. But Liutprand didn't know about it. At the same time, at that time, 10th century, garum was served as a condiment in special vessels like the ones I show you here, or it was used in cooking. And we learn about that from another comment of Liutprand about the nastiness of garum. So garum was a sauce by the 10th century. We have additional evidence for that, and we get our information from ecclesiastical texts of the Byzantine period, which include several references on garum, but this issue is still open for research because this type of sources have not been explored enough yet, but they are explored as we speak. So I suppose in the near future we'll know more about Byzantine garum. What we can tell now is that in this period, gyros was produced in several locations of the empire, as for example, the monastery of Agia Lavra that I show you here. In those days, garum was also called liquamen or abdomion from the Latin word abdomen, and it was liquid. And there is a reason why I insist on its liquid nature. Our next stop takes us to the 16th century, when Pierre Bellon, a French traveler, naturalist, writer, and diplomat, visited Constantinople, which by then was the capital of the Ottoman Empire. In his book Observations, we read, "There was a liquor called garum, which was once as widely used at Rome as vinegar is now. We found it as popular in Turkey as it ever was. There is no fishmonger shop in Constantinople that has not some for sale. The garum makers of Constantinople are mostly in Pera. They prepare fresh fish daily, sell it fried, and make use of the entrails and raw, steeping them in brine to turn them into garum. So by the 16th century, garum was still produced, but the information we have is about production in a very small scale. Fishmongers produced small quantities and sold them themselves. And there is mention of brine, of something liquid. So in the 16th century, garum was still a fish sauce. The next step takes us to the beginning of the 20th century and today. By then, things around garum had changed for good. Our evidence comes from a number of locations roughly within the red circle that I have drawn here on the map. During these first decades of the 20th century, this area saw much upheaval, with national borders being set or reset, new nations were shaped, and large parts of the populations were forcibly moved around these areas. These movements of populations created ethnically pure nations, but at the same time, they created a mixing of cultures. So today, it's very difficult to tell what knowledge came from where. I think we can consider the Garos information that I'm going to present now as a common culinary tradition of the whole region. By the early 20th century, Garos was not a liquid product anymore. In fact, in the fish processing tradition of the 20th century, there is no interest whatsoever for the liquid parts of the processing process. Fish can be salted, sun-dried, smoked, or any combination of the above. In fact, I only know of one case where fish is preserved in brine, in a liquid, and that is the pelamid. But the brine, the salamura, is not used. In the 20th century, when people talk about garos or gari in plural, they refer to the specific dry fermented product. Garos is made of fish livers only. There is no agreement as to what fish makes the best garos. In some regions, they believe that pelamid is the right fish. In others, they think it's the Atlantic mackerel. Whatever the case, it is a migratory fish we are talking about. And there is a reason for that. I will explain in a moment. Garos can be three things, depending on the regions our information comes from. For people who exploited the rich migratory fish on the western coast of the Black Sea, garos is the salted livers of mackerels. Livers were salted, drained, and then pressed with a heavy object on top for 4 days. The result was dry but still succulent, salty but also sweet, and appetizingly fragrant. This product was much loved. In the Marmara Sea, garos is a thick liquid which is made from the innards, not livers, of migratory fish, mostly pelamids. In other regions along the Aegean coast, garos is a paste. It is again made with the livers of pelamids or Atlantic mackerels, which are put in a bottle with salt. The bottle is left under the sun for some time until the content is fermented and loses its integrity. The result is a paste with a strong taste. It is used much like mustard to add extra layers of taste to meats, but also to eat with bread as a meze with ouzo. Garos in this period was and is now produced in small quantities in a household level by the fishermen themselves. To give you an idea, a medium-sized mackerel has a liver that weighs about 3 grams. So you need about 1,000 mackerels to get 3 kilograms of liver, and this will give you a little over a kilo of garos paste. You understand the problem. gyros can be made in too small quantity at home, or it has to be made alongside the mackerel salting business. In such a business, the gutting of mackerels would provide enough livers to make gyros, but if there is no such a business, then there is no gyros. As in previous periods, gyros in the 20th century and even now is considered something special and very valuable due to its rarity, and it is often given as a present to bon vivants and people with a developed palate. Most people, though, abhor it. Let me finish here with an observation. Although gyros of today is a different product than ancient gyros, there are in Greek some words that remind us of that distant past. Perhaps these exist in Turkish too. We call a stained garment that is impossible to clean garyasmeno, and also we call the brine used in cheese making gyros. The salted fish in general are called garata. So it seems that gyros is still with us after all these centuries, but like all things, it evolved and changed. Thank you. And now that I finished, I wonder whether you could follow the slides or not.
Yes, I could. I mean,
All right.
I think there was a problem at the very start, but then the rest, because I've seen in your pictures a picture of Lacerda, and it was written Lacerda, and you said Salamura, this is also a term we use. And now I don't know if he's among the audience, but I like a quote at Sally's book from Robert Curtis, the author of Garum and Salsamenta, Production and Commerce in Materia Medica. And he's one of the researchers of Pompeii Food and Drink Project. And he once said, Sally writes in her book, understanding fish sauce terminology is like pinning jelly on the wall. And once you think that you understand the basic terms, what garum is liquamen, and what garum is what liquamen is, and what gyros is, and all of a sudden everything changes. And that's the final example you gave about gyros being the salamura of the cheese and so on. This is, I think, in the late, when it comes to the contemporary times, from the Byzantine times, things get a little bit more complicated. So the gyros of today could be the Kolotura of Italy, whether it is garum or not. So what really happens chemically? Of course, we'll ask to Harold McGee, and what really happens that creates these fish sauces. What is this happening with the protein enzymes, whether you have the viscera or what really is happening in this horrible looking stinky fish sauce. And I remember, I everybody knows that I cannot really have strong fishes, but the way you describe smells is something very attractive. You described anchovies smelling of cocoa, potato, fatty, and geranium and melon, beef fat, fried, with such terms in your book, Nosedive. And this is very appealing to me. But I remember the surströmming, if I can pronounce it correctly, the Swedish fish sauce. And you were Fuchsia Dunlop, and you were the first two in line. when Ove Fossa brought it to the Oxford Symposium on Food and Cookery. And I ran away. I could not even listen to the lecture afterwards. It was so strongly smelling. So what happens with the smell? And Sally says that it doesn't, when you are recreating the garum, it doesn't smell that bad at all. So it's like an oxymoron. It's something rotten, but it's delicious and nice. So could you tell about the science and the smell profile and anything you would like to, please? Okay, I think has the sound connection. Okay, you are having him actually. Okay, fine.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Good. This is one of the huge challenges of this Zoom era, is that we all have different platforms and they all work differently. And this is my first experience with this one. So anyway, it's wonderful to be with you all and to celebrate Sally's amazing book. I mean, the detail and the range are just astonishing, and it's a contribution for the ages. So I'm very happy to have had the chance to read through it and to discuss it with Sally and with others. So my mandate today is to talk about what's going on in the making of fish sauce. So setting aside surströmming, which is a different kind of thing, we can think about fish sauce as a kind of benign decomposition. So we've seen Sally's wonderful pictures of fish slowly disintegrating during the making of fish sauce. That's the kind of evident physical decomposition. There's also, at the same time, and this is what makes fish sauce so delicious, an invisible chemical decomposition. And that's what generates all the flavor. So if you think about it, fish, living things in general, are made up of very large molecules, proteins, fats, oils, carbohydrates, cellulose, things like that. These things are very large molecules, and they don't have any qualities that we can register with our chemical senses. Our senses of taste and smell register the presence of small molecules, molecules that our receptors can grab onto and then send a message to the brain to say, I've got it, and this is what's out there. So in the case of taste, we have about a half dozen. There's some argument about this, but sweet and sour and salty and bitter, and much more recently appreciated, umami or savory. And then when it comes to aromas, the sky's the limit. There are there are certainly thousands, maybe 10,000, maybe more than that in our natural world that we can actually pick up and discriminate. Those molecules have to be small enough that they can fly through the air into our noses, where we can breathe them in and them. When we eat some, fly through the air in our mouth and up into our nose, and we detect them there. So small molecules are what give us flavor. And the key to fish sauce making is, as I say, benign decomposition, breaking down large molecules into smaller ones. Fish are mainly protein and oil. And the protein consists of subunits. These huge molecules consist of building block molecules, which are the amino acids. And it turns out that the amino acids are small enough that we can detect some of them on our tongue. Some of them are sweet, some of them are bitter, and then some are savory. Some give us the sensation of umami, and this is glutamic acid or glutamate in particular. And the remarkable thing about umami compared to those other tastes, sweet, sour, salt, bitter, there are lots of things in the world that that give us those tastes, especially sweetness and bitterness and acidity. There are lots of different molecules in the world that register with us in those ways. In the case of umami, it's only a very, very small number, and they're all related to protein metabolism. And glutamate is by far the most effective. So what happens in the making of fish sauce is that the proteins of the fish are broken down into amino acids, especially glutamic acid, glutamate, which gives us the sensation of umami, which is so rare in the rest of our experience. Now, that breakdown takes place thanks to the action of enzymes. Enzymes are, and this gets a little complicated because we're talking about breaking proteins down. Enzymes are proteins, but they're actually proteins that are specialized for the work of building up and breaking down other molecules, including proteins. So when a fish is caught and it dies and its systems are no longer functioning properly, then the building up and breaking down action of the enzymes gradually reverts to mostly breaking down because there's just not the energy and the material to keep building up. So as fish tissue sits after death, muscle enzymes in the tissue slowly break down the proteins of the muscle tissue into amino acids, including glutamate, and so flavor develops. And that's a very important aspect of how fish sauce gets its flavor. It's the same kind of thing that's actually going on in the making of Spanish jamón or Italian prosciutto. In those cases, what you've got are, of course, pig flesh, salted so that it doesn't spoil. And over the course of months, the enzymes in those muscles break down the muscle proteins to create, again, a wonderfully savory flavor. So that's part of what's going on in fish sauce making. The other part that is, again, invisible, but is important, is the contribution of microbes, bacteria in particular. Now, fish are, as we are, kind of paradises for microbes. You know, we have a microbiome that inhabits our skin. We have a microbiome that inhabits our mouths. We have a microbiome that inhabits our digestive system and actually does a lot of the work of digestion in there. Same is true of fish. And they have a wet surface on their skin that's much more hospitable to microbes than our dry skin is. So they have millions of bacteria per square centimeter of skin. And then their digestive systems, if they're included in the fish sauce making, contain billions of microbes per gram. So there are lots and lots of living things in the dead fish tissue as it's decomposing. And they also contribute to the development of fur because they have enzymes and they're breaking down proteins and fats in order to get energy from them and in order to nourish themselves and reproduce and so on. And in the process of that metabolism, they generate their own characteristic sets of volatile molecules that contribute a great deal to the aroma of fish sauces. So the muscle enzymes and the visceral enzymes, if the digestive system is included, they contribute largely to the savory quality, the taste, but it's the microbes that generate much of the aroma. And the fact that microbes are involved, of course, there's a dark side to the interest of microbes in animal flesh, and that is that microbes are sometimes pathogenic. They cause disease. Botulism is a very important disease that can result from the growth of Clostridium bacteria, a very particular kind of bacterium in animal flesh and other foods. And Clostridium is controlled by the use of salt. Clostridium and many other bacteria can't stand high levels of salt. And so that's one of the reasons that a lot of salt is used in fish sauce making to make sure that botulism does not develop during this decomposition process. So you can see that it's a very complicated system, and you can see why different kinds of fish sauces made in different ways with different materials can end up with very different flavors. So just I'll read off a list of the very different elements that help determine the final flavor and quality of fish sauces. First of all, of course, the kind of fish. Second, the water that the fishes come from, because they're the homes for the bacteria that end up in and on the fish. Which parts of the fish you use, and I should mention that when you use viscera and when you use blood, you're adding, of course, the digestive enzymes of the viscera, which are more active than the digestive enzymes in the muscle tissue itself. And in the case of blood and the liver, you're adding a lot of iron. And iron is a catalyst for chemical change that causes lots and lots of chemical reactions above and beyond what happens with enzymes. So if you add a lot of iron to the mix in the form of blood and liver, then you're going to develop flavors much more rapidly, and the flavors will end up being much stronger. So which parts of the fish, how the fish are handled before they're salted, whether they're sitting around for a while before they end up being salted, the proportion of salt, which varies tremendously from place to place and tradition to tradition. As Sally said, in Asia, the proportions are much higher, on the order of 20 to 30% salt, compared to about 15% in the Mediterranean. Those are very different conditions. The fermentation temperature will determine which microbes are able to manage those high salt levels and how rapidly they're able to work. The fermentation period, how long you give the fermentation to go, will determine the products of that fermentation. The various ways that the fermenting material can be handled during the fermentation. It can be agitated, it can be exposed to sunlight, exposed to air, or protected from sunlight, protected from air. You can drain and rebrine, you can filter, so many different possibilities. You can also add other ingredients. Sally mentioned wine. In Asia, oftentimes roasted grains are added, tamarind, palm sugar, sometimes caramel or molasses are added to give the brown color if it's not already developed during the fermentation process. These days, people are adding particular microbial cultures like koji to see if that will influence things. And then, of course, the aging time, the ripening time, which can be many, many months. And that gives all these small molecules that have developed during the fermentation a chance to react with each other and generate all kinds of new things. So, as I say, the taste comes mainly from the enzyme action on the proteins. In the case of the aroma, it's largely the metabolism of the microbes and the chemical reactions that take place among the small molecules during the aging process. And so you end up with lots and lots of what are called fatty acids. Acetic acid, vinegar is one of those, but there's also butyric, propionic, isovaleric acids. They give the kind of cheesy note to many fish sauces, very much like the breakdown of milk fats during cheese making. And then there are fishy notes that come from amines. And then there are roasty, meaty notes that come from molecules called pyrazines and from sulfur compounds. So the overall effect is salty and umami taste, and then fishy, cheesy, meaty, rich aroma. Those are the primary qualities. And then, as I say, depending on the particular conditions and the details, you'll get different nuances on top of those things. Anyhow, one last thing, which is that it turns out that there's a burgeoning scientific literature on fish sauces, because it's become recognized all over the world that this is a wonderful way to make use of fish wastes and get something valuable out of them. To give you just one example, I just came across last night a paper by a group in China studying the making of a kind of fish sauce from the heads of tilapia fish, which are freshwater fish. So there's all kinds of experimentation going on in gastronomic kitchens as well as the fishing industries. And so it's a very exciting time to be interested in this whole area. So that's it.
That's wonderful, and I'm so grateful to you that you mentioned also the dangers, because there's a comeback in making these fish sauces, and many young chefs are experimenting with their own versions, but then there's the danger of botulism. I think we have to give sort of credit to the Noma Guide to Fermentation. Every young chef is having this as a guide and then trying to make their garum, not only from fish, but from other sources as well. Now, Pere will I mean, everybody in the group will have zillions of questions for you, I guess. And the first time when Sally and Pere met, the first ever question of Sally was the salt content Pere uses in his own products. So this you explained already that the salt content is really important. But then you also mentioned that that gives the dangers, and I think the pollution of the sea might be a future problem with heavy metals in the fish. I don't know about this topic, but this brought to my mind as well. But now we have to listen to Pere first and his own experiences, because he has a very good story on how he started, and also tackling with this zero waste issue that many fisheries are making tinned sardines or this or that, and tinned fishes, and all the viscera and the blood and the fish bones go to waste. So this could be a perfect byproduct that can be even more valuable than the other product itself. So let's listen to Pere and his own experiences. So the ground is yours, Pere. Sorry, I think I'll just step in because I tried to call Pere. I think he is muted.
Sorry.
So
yeah, sorry.
Okay, okay. Please start from the very start.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was saying thank you for the invitation. I'm so pleased to be with you tonight, and I'm proud and honored to share my point of view of this amazing garum world. I was saying I'm a chef. I'm a curious cook in Girona area, in the northeast part of Spain, close to the Mediterranean. And 4 years ago, when my Scata project started, I was invited to an anchovy business. On that time, I was taking care of a Two-Michelin starred restaurant during 15 years. And I was not cooking fish at all in there. So my proposal was focus on the seasonal products, garden products, game, wild mushrooms, but I didn't cook fish at all. So one anchovy business invited me to show me all the business, and of course to sell me anchovy fillets. And I realized an amazing new world for me. All my explanation tonight, understand, is from a chef's point of view. So I really love food. I always I'm focused on the taste of products. And all these 4 years while I create my business, I always followed my taste. So again, inside the anchovy business, I was so interested about what was happening inside the barrels where the anchovies were. And I asked to try that liquids, and I figured out that the taste of that was so amazing. Then I asked to the owner, what do you do with these liquids? And they say they threw it away. They needed to recycle. So I asked to take some to the restaurant, and once in there, I started to cook with that product. At the same time, I check about what was going on with this liquid, if there was kind of a classical recipes, traditional Catalan gastronomy with that liquid. I shared with some colleagues, and we didn't use it, at least in my area. Even in Spain, we didn't use fish sauce as per tradition. Then one day I asked to come back and to get a little bit more focused about what was going on in there. Today, I can explain that what I do is to take care about all the leftovers of the anchovy business. Anchovy business is still in my area. They sold the anchovies to sell the anchovies, but they have a really, really amazing leftover for me, and is what I'm doing. I'm cooking my sauces. I want to share with you that on that area, in La Scala, close to Barcelona, all this Mediterranean side, 2000 before Christ, Phoenician, Greeks, Romans arrived on the Peninsula Iberica, and they left this heritage, this gastronomical heritage of curing, fermenting fish. Sally and Dimitra were sharing all this information with all of us before. So anchovy business, what is doing is kind of reinterpreting this way to preserve fish, to ferment fish. So again, 4 years ago, I started with that sauce, and what I did was about take salmuera, take the brine of the different years of the anchovies. So on the anchovy business, we can find 2-year brines, 1 year and a half, 1 year, 6-month brines with the anchovy inside. And I took a little bit of each brine. Then I realized that each brine had a special smell and a special taste. And I recreate a blend. I create my recipe, a 10% of that one, a 20% of the other one. And I just thickened a little bit all this coupage, this blend of, I would say, Kolotura in that case. And what I had was this kind of fish sauce, garum sauce. Then once I had this in my restaurant, I started to cook, to check, and I find that was a really, really interesting product. And then I industrialize. I create my brand, all the technical aspects, and also the safetiness as a fish sauce. So nowadays, the sauce, Escata sauce, has a heating treatment to ensure its safetiness. From that sauce, it came another one, is Escata oli, is one part of the anchovy garum, and the 3 parts of extra virgin olive oil. And what I do is to shake a little bit, and what we have is an emulsion. For me, is a kind of a Roman emulsion. Is a really amazing salsa menta. Again, inside the anchovy business, inside the barrel, there are many, many leftovers. Still nowadays, anchovy business in my area and in all the Mediterranean, they want to sell the anchovies. So inside the barrel, once the anchovies are removed, there is another remaining. That remaining is the salt. The salt that it didn't get diluted with the brine. So that salt is a 2 years salt in brine. It took all the garum, and it has all the anchovy umami. So from one side is salt with extra power, with extra umami. For me, it is always so important, the taste in that case. And another product, another leftover is the anchovy spine, the anchovy bone. So when the anchovy master inside the anchovy business says, hey guys, this barrel is ready, we can clean the anchovies, they remove the fillets, they put inside the cans with olive oil, whatever, to sell the anchovy fillets, but there is still another remaining, the spine. Again, I check if there was some information, something that is doing something. I didn't find anything. At the same time, I start to recreate some tests. I roast the anchovies and I blend it. Sorry, I roast the anchovy bone and I blend it to get this anchovy spine powder. So all my products, they come from the fish, of course, but at the same time they have this extra power umami, this savory, these molecules that are inside. Harold a few minutes ago was sharing about this. If you smell the products, you see, you smell, you taste. There is cheese, there is a red prawn, there is Iberico, there is something really unbelievable. For me, the point is at the same time to make a blend, because again, I'm a chef, I'm a cook, but I'm not recreating garum. I'm not doing a recipe. I'm taking care again of the leftovers. So this is an important point. Is a circular economy point. So amazing at the same time. But I'm not pushing to my provider, Anchovas El Chillo. I'm not pushing to them, saying, "Hey guys, I need 300 liters of this amazing liquid or 700 of that one." No, what we have, let's try it. Let's recreate a recipe and let's replicate that recipe. At the same time, with my products, as a chef, as a cook, I started to cook, to try to recreate applications with my products. So from the beginning, from the A till Z, from pastry, from sweet, curing meats in salamura, all these products can match, can go perfectly. Without, and that's another interesting point for me, without matching really in a really strong way the fish taste, the anchovy taste. So if the products are by raw, if we use it by raw, I mean some drops over a fresh tomato, cucumber, of course we will have this fish taste, this anchovy taste, but things change while we cook, while there is temperature in our elaboration. So with garums, with all these products, we can avoid salt at all. Of course, we can season our elaborations with the spine, with the garum, with the spine, and the garum, mix it together. And again, what we are going to have will be even more tasty elaboration. By comparison, if we compare same elaboration with garum or without garum, of course, taste will not be the same. And I want to present the last craziness is Escata distillate, is anchovy smoked spine distillate with fennel and curcuma, is with a low percentage of alcohol, is 20%. But for me, nowadays, the most amazing thing is to see how my products, how these, I would say, leftovers react with all the culinary elaboration. Surprise for me is they give me really amazing surprises. At the same time, Escata, my business, we are developing nowadays a properly garum. So as I said to you, I'm taking care about the whole leftovers of anchovy industry producers. Nowadays, in springtime in my area, anchovy factories, they start to buy engraulis and crassicolus is the Latin name of anchovy, and from one side they are removing the head with the intestines. So we are trying garum from one side. And as I said to you, I have all my products. I identify that products and I separate all that products. You can see the salt, you can see the garum, you can see the spine. At the same time, I'm blended all together again to recreate this fish paste, all this knowledge that we have in the wall. Because at the end, what chefs, what cooks do, or at home, is to season, is to savory our elaborations. For me, honestly, that ones are is the common sense, is to cook with common sense, to use the products that I have in my area. At the same time, there is all this knowledge, these historic things that are there. They arrive in here, not far from where I'm speaking right now, and is really, really amazing project. The thing is to take care about all the leftovers and create a know-how to help other business, to help other ideas to continue moving and to have a better world for all. Thank you.
Great, Pere. You really have a great range of products, and this distillate is amazing. And yeah, Elvan the other day was saying that it's becoming very fashionable to use Kolotura in gin and tonics and Bloody Marys in Italy. So your sauces can be a mixologist ingredient as well. Not only the distillate, but the sauce itself. And this, I can imagine the salt brim for a dry martini or whatever. So, and you are using it also on chocolate ganache and tomato salad. You put your sauce almost on everything. That's really very interesting. So it seems that there's a great potential. And Fatih Tutak will be speaking as a guest speaker, but we first have to have, and he experiments with everything with garum in Istanbul. But we have to have first Elvan Uysal from Rome, who has been recently went to the Amalfi Coast. We were so jealous of her because we were just following from the stories. And I said, well, I should have been there. And she drove to Cetara to find everything about Kolotura di Alice. So tell us about your findings, Elvan, and especially about the heritage of this fishing village. Says. Okay, if we have Elvan back, but I will start telling about her experiences anyway, because I think this Cetara is a fishing village and is a key production for the citizens of Cetara. And so it's very important for their livelihood. And it's a very important, as I'm a restoration architect and I'm interested in the conservation of historic sites, when I heard about Elvan's experiences, I was overly excited. So can we have you, Elvan? Can we hear you? Nope. Okay. Well, I'll continue to try to say something about Kolotura, and Harold says that your image is inverted also. I think Elvan has a bad connection. We'll see. And unlike many small villages in the Amalfi Coast, which are very touristic, I think Cetara remains to be a fishing village. So Kolotura, the continuation of Kolotura, is a very important key product for them. And it's embedded in their culture in a way. And they have, I think, recently received a DOC appellation as well. So the continuation of Kolotura and this fishing practice is key to their to the sustainability of the heritage of Cetara. And can we have Elvan?
Maybe
No.
yes.
Oh
Can you
yes.
hear me?
Okay.
Sorry, it was my settings. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay. So
I heard everything you said, and I think you already said all. I had a problem with my internet connection, and I'm connected with my phone. Unfortunately, I had some wonderful pictures to make all of you jealous. I will try to share from my computer. Well, before starting, I just wanted to say that reading Sally's book was a wonderful experience for me. It felt like a culinary Jurassic Park, that she took these fish bones and created a huge world. It's an amazing book. And she also has another book that I really love, the classical cookbook with Andrew Dalby, and Harold McGee's latest book, The Nosedive. I've been diving in these days, and it's amazing too. So complicated concepts explained in such a simple and beautiful way. I just wanted to say that I'm so happy to be here with you. And besides being Sally's and Harold's books fans, I'm here to represent the Italian connection. So as Aylin has already summed up, I'm going to talk about the contemporary Italian fish sauce, Kolotura of Cetara. And I was in Cetara last week to interview people who produce this wonderful sauce. Cetara is a town in southern Italy by the Amalfi Coast, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world, I guess. But it is like the introvert child of Amalfi Coast. It's when you go to the town, you just don't see it at once. You need to enter, and then you meet the town really, not like, I don't know, not like Positano. It's there and says, I'm beautiful and I'm here. So it's a fisherman's town still, despite being in a very touristical area. The first night I was there, I was dining by the sea, and suddenly, late in the evening, the church bells start to ring, and it wasn't an hour that they were supposed to. Then we see this tuna fish boat with lights and flags. The church bells were hailing the new fish boat, the tuna boat that was coming to town for the first time. So it was an amazing thing, because people really live with fish there, and they still have a connection, and that's amazing. So what is Kolotura? So Kolotura is what Garum is not, we can say. I mean, from what we heard so far, in Garum, mainly viscera and blood is used, and different fish used. In case of Kolotura, the blood and the viscera are taken out, and you use just the muscle part of the fish, the noble part of the fish, and it is made only by of anchovies, just anchovies. And actually, there is a professor from University of Naples, Alfredo Caranante. He says that there was a kind of garum made by anchovies also in ancient times. So there might be a kind of direct connection. And so in Cetara, the oldest reportings on Kolotura are from the 12th century. So also in the medieval times, in the area, the Kolotura was used and made. So, and how Kolotura is made? Well, it starts in the sea, of course. The tradition requires the 27th of March as the day, as the starting date of the fishing for Kolotura. And there is a very special traditional way of fishing called cianciolo in Italian, and this technique requires a lampara. Lampara, you could translate like the lamp event or something like that, something about lamp light, because in this kind of fishing, there's a boat that lights the surface of the sea, and the anchovy, the fish comes and they are caught. And the romantic thing about this technique is that since on full moons there is too much light and the fish are not attracted to lampara, the fishermen don't go fishing in full moon. So the Kolotura process starts in the sea, and with the catching of this fish with the special technique, and they need to be processed as soon as possible. And the first thing is the fish is cleaned mainly by women, and still most workers doing this job are women. And so the head, the viscera is taken out, and the fish is put to salt, preferably salt from Sicily, Trapani, the sea salt, hand grown, I would say. And so the head, and they wait like from some hours to a day to clean all the blood and everything from the fish. And once the blood is out, there's another process of salting. And after that, the fish starts to be put inside terzini. Terzini means a third of a barrel. And they are traditionally made of chestnut wood, because chestnut wood is hard and it doesn't give away tannins easily. So the fish, after being mixed with the salt, it is put inside these terzini, head to tail, in a way that there is no space between the fish. It's very important for the pressing procedure. And after the first layer, they put another layer of salt, and then again another layer of fish, and it goes on like this, like a lasagna. And near the ending, they create a kind of, they create a circle with the fish, and it is called corona in Italian, which means crown, because it looks like a crown. And then a piece of wood, tampagno, is put on on the fish, and then it is closed. A weight is put above. So in a way that the fish ages while being pressed with the weight on it, and that weight is mainly are huge, very big rocks, and well, today actually there are also producers who use different material, plastic or other kind of ways. But traditionally they use rocks, and it's so beautiful to see all those rocks used in many years, and they have crystals, different levels of crystals on the rocks. So it's very beautiful to see. So what else? Well, originally in the house, when they used to make it at home, the aging was a shorter period. It could be some months, 6 months or 9 months. But lately, the producers prefer longer aging times because it creates a more sophisticated aroma and color as well. So the aging phase depends on the producer's choice, and there's another phase actually that depends on producer's choice. That is, after a couple of weeks, the fish has some water coming out, the fioritura. Some producers take it out to get a more how can I say, clear product, and some prefer leaving it. And so it is a very time-consuming and costly procedure, actually. Like from 70 kilos of fish, you can get 8 liters of Kolotura in 3 years. That's very interesting. And when the producer decides that it is time to drain, actually Kolotura means drain, so they make holes under the terzinis with a small instrument that's called vriale. I don't know if I can show you, actually. I'll try to show some pictures from my computer. Let's see if yeah, maybe yes. Okay, so this is the terzinio, and you can see the rock here, and here we have this instrument, vriale, that makes a hole under the container, and it looks like this because in years there are different holes and they are closed in time, and every time there is a new hole. And so it starts to drain, and once it's all drained, there is another phase of filtering, and some producers put the Kolotura inside glass vessels, and they make it filter also inside the glass vessels. So it's very time-consuming, and the know-how is very important. Like, there are no formulas, there are no recipes. So the master who decides how much salt to use, and that's the art of it. So I wanted to put a face on the product, and want to show you some of the people I talk with who make Kolotura. And so this is the people who I learned all these things. So this is Timoteo. Timoteo is started this job when he was 14 years old, and it's like 48 years he's been working. And he says, well, the salt depends on the fish, depends on this, depends on that, but he's approximately said that more or less he puts about 12 to 13 kilos of salt, trapani salt, for 70 kilos of anchovies. And so his armatory is one of the youngest establishments, actually. Luigi and his sister Andrea had put an emphasis on sustainability, so that's very interesting. They have a project that they collect plastic webs that the fishermen leaves in the seas. So in Cetara, that was very interesting for me to see that people, they just don't think about their production, but they think about their sea and the land. So everybody has something that takes care of the whole picture itself. So another Cetarian that I had pleasure to meet was Acquapazza Gennaro. So the production of salted anchovies and Kolotura go hand by hand. And with Gennaro, we tasted his Kolotura and also the salted anchovies. And it was incredible to see that the anchovies after a year could have apricot smell besides the prosciutto, cured meat, and that leather-like smells. And Gennaro's mother was a lemon carrier, and he remembers that when he was a child, in the streets of, actually the stairs, because there are no streets, it's all hills, and there are like most of the streets are made of stairs. There are common areas, and women used to clean fish there and made tomato sauce. And for him, this childhood recollection, the knowledge that he got from seeing people doing things is crucial for the quality he aims. And at the moment in Cetara, the municipality has took the production out of the town because of the smell and hygienic reasons. So Gennaro and some of his friends are trying to press the municipality to bring back the production inside the town. Because if you see things being done while as a child, it becomes your body language. And for the continuity of the tradition and the good quality, that information, that knowledge that you acquire without even noticing is very important. And another person that I had the chance to meet was Pasquale Torrente, who is a very, he's like the ambassador of Kolotura out of Cetara. So this is him and his son at the restaurant. So I had a long chat with Pasquale, and I love Kolotura and I use it a lot in my kitchen. But for me, it is an acquired taste. I learned it afterwards, after I came here. So I was curious to know, having Kolotura in his DNA, what does he feel? What does it remember? What does he remembers when he smells Kolotura or what he tastes? And his answer was that it smells like a love night. And I started to laugh. And he said, I'm not talking metaphorically. Then he took the Kolotura from the table and put it in his hands as if it's the most beautiful perfume in this world, and made me smell it. And it really did smell like a love night. I mean, it's body liquid fluids, and it was incredible. So I happened to feel the Kolotura from insider's point of view. And so he buys his Kolotura from his neighbors. Actually, they happen to be the only people in Cetara to produce inside Cetara. They have a very small production. Here, that's Raffaella and Giulio from Nettuno, and this is their barrels here inside their shop. And well, in the whole time I was there visiting places, the only place that just opening the door, you have this incredible smell of I don't know, dried leather, cured meat, or tobacco, and all those and the funky cheese, all those smells that are attributed to Kolotura. That their shop was the only place really it was in there. And it would be great if they could bring the production back to the town, as they are working on. I don't know if I'm over my time. Yes, okay, sorry. Then I will not talk about the rest. Sorry.
No, it's very interesting what you are telling. And actually, yesterday, I had the news of Pasquale Torrente from LA. My food writer friend, Argot Murelius, we were chatting on Zoom, and then she brought up a bottle of Pasquale Torrente Tura and tasted it in front of me. So this is all very exciting. And we have Fatih now as our guest. Fatih is a celebrated chef, but he became famous in Bangkok, and all about Asian sauces and the use of Asian fish sauces in the Asian culture. From Tokyo to Bangkok, he worked all over. Now he's back in Turkey, so he's experimenting and doing lots of his own garums. And at the last moment we invited, and we are also on the chat line some other chefs coming in, just contributing with their comments from Lisbon, for example, Pedro Almeida, and so on. So yes, we are going to listen to Fatih for a moment, and he's going to tell us what he makes exactly. Then we can have our question and answers and chat. So Fatih, can you?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course. Perfect.
Okay, so greetings from Constantinople. So thank you so much for inviting for me to express my ideas, and also, during the few years about experimental recipes for us to create in terms of regarding Garum, the philosophy and the techniques. Basically, we were working on creating new flavors, almost like as for the Garum, almost like now 4 years since from the Bangkok. As Aylin mentioned, I have been living in Asia for 16 years, from Bangkok to Tokyo, Hong Kong, Beijing, many other places. And I always discover the essence of the umami, try to discover essence of the umami and the secret ingredients, the flavor agents of the cuisines. So I think what attracts me, why don't we have this kind of sauces in present times? Why don't we use? And I would say, since 2 years, I discover in my kitchen and with my R&D team at Turk in Istanbul, cooking with time. So what's mean cooking with time? So basically, we just describe the time when it's ready, which is Harold also explained when the enzymes break and when the sardines or other ingredients are ready to blow up. Our, ingredients. We also, when we create something in my kitchen, it's feed us to create new ideas, to come up with the new ideas, with the new flavors. When I look at back to the ancient time in the Romans, what they did, I think they were quite gourmands. So they like to eat nice food. They like to eat delicious stuff. So that's why they invent garum many, many years ago. And also, I think this is one of the right and pure technique without using any chemical. It is very natural and super, super natural. It is very organic. It is very real because you only have, salt and protein. That's it. So basically, when we work on creating a garum with other ingredients, I think we protect geography, we protect earth, we protect the products. Also, we are, as a chef, one of the most important things, I think, is a sustainability and don't waste for the present, also leave something to future, basically. So this is very important motto in our kitchen. So when we do preparation in the kitchen, we like to use as much as we can, everything, because the Mother Earth provide us products from the earth, from the sea, from the water. There is plenty of different ingredients. For us to use that ingredients as much as we can in a maximum level without wasting. So that's why I think using garum, it's perfect. You turn waste into rock star. It is amazing taste. When we made our first garum, we didn't believe that we can, use these ingredients, this simple liquid, turn to something like crazy when we use as a flavor agent. So how we start, actually, we start with standards, which is with anchovies, with sardines. And then after we start to use, and we experiment with turbo, another fish, which is completely different family than anchovy, sardines, and tuna mackerel family. And then we said, why don't we use squid's innards with the ink itself? And then after we get even more matte, we did with sea urchin. So after also we did search, we inspired from other chefs also, because I think we feed each other. We also talked previously with Pere. He came to my restaurant. He left his products. He also inspired me a lot, as well as, René Redzepi with other chefs in Australia. And also the place I have been living in Thailand, they create some of my good chefs. For example, in Bolan, Dylan and Bo, they used to create their own fish sauce, which was amazing. So we tried also from the duck gizzards, garum, from the lamb. So those are really a lot of experimental garums, and most of them is worked. And now our terrace, our storage is completely full of garum products. They are waiting to be ready, and most of them will be using for our new menu for the future as well. So when we add this ingredient into our sauces or last touches for something else, even spreading or mixing up with the butter, I think it creates completely burst effect of umami. It's crazy. So, you know, we have been searching and always working on creating this kind of, you know, the taste profiles. Because when you're a chef, I think in the kitchen, you want to create something memorable, but at the same time, also experimenting and also doing something like crazy stuff. You know, we sporting the world. In the rest of it is something like out of this world. You sport and you also, you know, protect the earth. At the same time, you create something amazing taste. And when we serve to the guests, they're trying to understand what's inside of the sauce, what gives this taste profile. So that's garum, basically. You know, we have the secret ingredients, cooking with time. It's garum, and I'm for inviting me, and I'm very humble and great to meet all of you. I hope we can meet in person again, and healthy days. Good evening.
Is garum only from fish or seafood? But for example, in the Garum Museum in Bahia Claudia in Cadiz, among the listed garum sources, there is also fish meat with land animals, which is meat. And then you said duck gizzards and lamb intestines and so on. So are you really making garum in the ancient style from fishes? Or are you using other proteins? That's very interesting, because another chef from Istanbul, from Alaf, Deniz Temel, sent me a jar of how do you say, potted meat, kavurma, for as a New Year present. And I said that he said that it's with garum, and I said, you know, I don't eat fish. No, he said it's meat garum. And what is a meat garum? And Sally says that in antique sources, there's only one mention of meat garum. I think it is in Neoponica. So what is exactly garum? Is it a technique? Is it a protein fermentation? Then what is the line between the fish garums, fish sauces, and the other new garums, especially in the Noma Guide to Fermentation? There's everything from other sources. So there's a new fad, I think now. Sorry. So there's a new, how do you say, fashion now, I think, a fad now, to make garum out of everything. And there's a very young chef, Umut Ulaş. I don't know if he's online, but he forwarded the question. So what is exactly garum? If we start to call every fermentation from other intestines, lamb meat or other meat, then can we say that soy sauce is actually being garum? So this is a question, you know, how do we draw the line between a garum and the protein fermentation? Okay, start discussing. So I don't know if what Fatih does, experiments, is on the normal line. Apparently he makes the ancient line also, but I think he's also following the normal line of the new garum age. So
Can I say something?
yes, of course.
I think that this story about what is garum is very much like what is language. These products, just like language, evolve, and every at different points of time and different societies, people view things differently. So how do we expect to have one single meaning for what garum is? That didn't even happen in antiquity, as Sally very well knows. People use the word and change it, and then the next generation changes a bit more, and the next changes a bit more. And let's keep in mind that garum is not something which is common these days in our world. And most of the garum we have been discussing today are recreations of garum. They are not, they don't follow a natural continuation. So I find it pretty natural that we are talking about all these different garums, and actually I find it quite interesting too, and nice.
Because I can be cut off at any time. My battery is becoming low. Yeah, I think that they among the audience there can be others to comment. I'm still, you know, when it comes to beans, soy sauce, bean garum, I mean, I'm a traditionalist. I'm a conservation architect. I'm for conserving the heritage. So there has to be a line, I think, when that's my attitude. Of course, we have to open to development, and maybe we can call the other products new age garums or garum inspired, blah blah. What do you think? Harold, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I guess I would say that garum, it's a product, but it also represents a process. And it's a process that can be applied to any proteinaceous material. And so if you qualify it with the name of the material, then I think you're being respectful of tradition while indicating that you're departing from it. So I don't see anything wrong with calling grasshopper garum.
Okay, when it comes to plant-based garums?
For example, I mean, plants are not proteinaceous for the most part.
Yes.
And shoyu, soy sauce, of course, is made from particularly protein-rich seeds, but it has its own tradition. So, you know, there's no competition there. Mm-hmm.
There's a very interesting question coming. I have had garum at Momofuku Ko as added to a brownie. Is from Jason Pug. Does Harold have an idea why chocolate or even butter fats in a brownie work so well with garum? And we know that Pere uses his garum on chocolate ganache, like salted caramel. We cannot hear you, Pere. And Harold has to reply also. Yeah.
For me, there is a really strong connection in that case with all fermented foods. I mean, with the cacao, of course, and cacao and garum, the saltiness of garum, the umami, and also with the acidity with the cacao, with the chocolate, you can match perfectly. In addition, I'm so passionate with bean-to-bar chocolate, and I did some taste at home. Per 1 kilo of nibs, 500 grams of sugar, and I added at the beginning, while the processing the nibs with the sugar and the machine, I added 40% of blended anchovy spine, and the result was unbelievable too, and so amazing. For me, it matches, of course.
And and Harold mentions, I mentioned before that anchovies have a cacao note. So how do you combine these fish sauces with chocolates? And I will ask also to Fatih if he ever uses it on desserts. But Harold, can you comment on that?
Well, as Pere said, chocolate, cacao is fermented, just as garum is. And so there is going to be some crossover in their flavors. And then it seems to me that what garum can bring to chocolate is something that chocolate itself lacks. So it adds a layer of taste and aroma that the chocolate itself doesn't have. And of course, I mean, salted caramels are a good example, or salt with chocolate. These are all pretty well known. And what you're doing with garum is kind of extending that, you're adding a kind of savory element to something that we usually experience as sweet, and extending its flavor, its taste, and its aroma in complementary ways.
Aylin, could I say something on this?
Yes, of course.
Hi. There is one recipe in Epicurus for a dessert, and it's a dessert made with pears cooked in honey with dessert wine, and then it's set with eggs, so it's a little bit like a custard. And it has cumin and pepper and fish sauce. And it works gloriously. It is quite a bland flavour without the fish sauce, but the fish sauce transforms it into something very, very special. And it was a dessert. It was almost certainly served as a dessert. And I used to do taste testing with children, because it's the ideal way to get that experience of what it really tastes like. And I made it with salt, I made it with nothing, and I made it with fish sauce. And they all chose the fish sauce one until they were told that it contained fish sauce, at which point they said no, they don't want to eat it. Because the perception of fish in a dessert for children and for many adults was just wrong. It just didn't make sense. But of course, we know it works, and I'm really looking forward to tasting it with chocolate. It's very exciting.
Well, it's a cultural thing as well. Dimitra will agree. We combine, and also Pere, we combine brine cheeses, feta cheese, and beyaz peynir in our case, with jams and preserves, and we eat them together. This is a mutual taste experience that we share. And Pere will say about the same with manchego cheese and membrillo and the quince paste. So we all have these combinations, but again, I think it's our prejudices. Sometimes the fish doesn't really goes with sweet. If it's fishy, of course. I'm a non-fish person. So, you might experiment on me, actually. Though I remember Harold, after tasting the Surströmming, still smelling heavily when we were trying to chat while having coffee. despite the height difference, because we are like the dome and the minaret. I mean, the mosque and the minaret. When we stand close to each other, I'm short, and he's tall. And yeah,
we have an interesting question here about cleaning process of the
oh
intestines.
yes.
And I suppose Harold could actually tell us as well. But the point is, you actually need the digestive enzymes that are present in the viscera and in the digestive tract of the fish. You need them in order to dissolve the protein. So you do not clean them. It is natural, pure, as it comes out of the body of the fish.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. It would be very difficult, I think, to clean out the way one does tripe, for example.
Exactly.
That would be quite a chore.
Yeah.
But may I add that people actually do that? I've heard that they do it here on Crete with the intestines of large groupers.
Oh, good heavens.
Not to create garum or something, to salt the intestines, but they do clean them.
They do.
Like tripe.
Do they push water through them? Is that what you're saying? They actually flush them out?
Yes.
Wow.
That must be quite difficult to do. I mean, even with lamb intestines, it's a very, very tiresome and very not so enjoyable process.
But Aylin, again, it's a cultural thing. I like doing it.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So
I think okay. My ancestors are some of them are very Nordic, so from Königsberg, and
the trick is to focus on the final product. Once you imagine the final product, you go through this process easily.
Yeah, and there's also the experimentation with seawater. Again, Umut Ulaş wrote that there's this, when he experimented with seawater, he always got it wrong. And I think Sally has such an experience because but I would assume that, because the seawater is an uncontrolled medium, you cannot control the amount of salt in seawater. But then, of course, they could have salt pans, I mean, like salt harvesting, and they could maybe control the salt level of the seawater. Why didn't they do that? Or did they do that?
In relation to making fish sauce, I think they actually use the salt pans to create crystal salt in order to salt the fish. It's possible that the brine that they are using to dilute the fish sauce and to store the salted fish is going to be seawater that's been exposed to the sun and concentrated into a certain saltiness, which they would have got from taste, I'm sure. And so there is two different types of salt. You've got the crystal salt to actually salt the fish, because you need the crystals to touch and penetrate the fish. But the brine can be concentrated seawater, I would have thought.
Oh, sorry, I'm dealing with my connection. Do we have other questions from the ground, or just from here?
I don't think we do.
And is Fatih still there, or just disappeared, or Elvan? Because Elvan was going to add something, but then
I think we're down to 5 people.
Really?
Yeah.
No. There's.
Well, no, there's 40 listening.
Okay.
I think we could round up, could we not?
Well, Elvan just wrote to me that, these Chatara people are seeing themselves as the descendants of garum making people. So that's important from the heritage point of view. So it seems that, I think I have to wrap up. I think, the revivals of such things are getting more and more, how do you say, à la mode, because gastronomy is now about also telling a story and connecting yourself to the past, to your ancestors. And gastronomy tourism is getting more and more in now. And then also the story, when we are talking about tourism, is about storytelling and experience as well. So I think there will be a lot of revival. I cannot see anymore, but there was this guy from Pedro from near Troia Museum in Portugal. And so I think it will be these garum, your rivals will be all around Pere. And if Fatih is hearing us, the garum will be popping up here and there from various corners of the Mediterranean. And among the audience, there was Mutlu Tömbekici. They made several revivals of Roman feasts and from her own garum sauce. So I think we'll be hearing more about the fish sauces. And Harold, your crash course on fish sauces have been really, really very inspiring. I think we are going to have this talk also as an ebook, hopefully. So the questions are also precious. And I see one question coming out. Can we talk about the difference between fish sauce from Asia and how it compares to garum? Japanese fish sauce is made out of ayu, a seasoned sweet fish, to control the fishiness. Yeah, the fishiness. Yeah, maybe you can see the question now, Harold and Sally.
Well, Sally explained that Asian fish sauces are generally made with much more salt and aged much longer than the garums that we know about, at least from the ancient literature. And of course, with different fish, I'm not sure that controlling fishiness is necessarily why a particular fish would have been used. I think it's probably more likely that there were, at one time anyway, lots and lots of ayu, and so you could take advantage of them to make a fish sauce from them. But that's just my guess.
Mm-hmm. We also have invading fishes from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. Maybe we could introduce them to the garum world. And because these invading fishes are creating a threat also to the local fishes of the Mediterranean and at the Aegean. We have this problem. So maybe we could think of having other new fishes, like the lionfish, for example. We could do garum from the lionfish. That could be something. But this is the environmentalists. Maybe Dimitra can say something on that.
Sorry?
Okay.
As a final little anecdote, can you hear me? You can, I think. I heard a story about a fish sauce factory in Canada that was making traditional Thai fish sauce using a local fish. And the factory actually closed down. There was some financial problems, and they couldn't carry on. So the guy actually left the factory and left it full of fish sauce and ran away. And it's a tiny village, and this factory has been full of fish sauce, rotting and decaying and filling the town with the smell for the last 10 years. And it's become an environmental hazard, and they cannot clear it. It costs so much money to clear that they have just left it there. And apparently it's full of mold, and the smell is appalling. So it's an anecdote that tells you that fish sauce has to be cared for and looked after. And if you leave it to rot, if you leave it for too long and don't take care of it, it can ruin a community. It has ruined this community in Canada. If anybody would like the link, I have kept it. It's a fascinating story.
I think we need to wrap up. We are over 2 hours now. So I think the gastronomy tourism issue, to the zero waste issue, the dangers of botulism, the terminology, the history, the methods of making, the survival of fishing communities, heritage, and even making use of invading fishes to protect the local fishes in the Mediterranean coast. So I think that was amazing, and it is my dream to come true, to bring together the science, and also the history, and also the gastronomy part together. I think there's a lot of things that we can share and learn from each other. We can even create maybe a Garum discussion group. And there has been on the Facebook, for example, Jim Chevalier had a Garum discussion in his Facebook discussion group. So I think we need to keep in touch and do it quite often, and experiment and learn about Garum more, about this mutual heritage we have everywhere around the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and apparently from also Asia. So thank you all. And if you have any questions, I think you can still further forward to Turquoise, and they will convey it to us or to the speakers if your question is not answered, or if we didn't see it. So thank you really, and I'm grateful to all the participants in the group. You made a dream happen, bringing coming together from all disciplines. I think this multidisciplinary approach in gastronomy is so important. So thank you.